Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Fatih Şemsettin Işık, and thank you for joining us to the first session of TRT World Forum Digital Debate Series between integration and discrimination, migration, diaspora, and minorities today. In this series, TRT World Forum aims to promote an academic and intellectual platform for discussing the phenomena of immigration, diaspora, and minority communities. In this first session of the project, titled The Turkish Diaspora in Europe, an assessment of the past 60 years, we will discuss the capacity and power of the Turkish diaspora in Europe with regards to the political, social, and economic life. A significant portion of the approximately 6.5 million strong Turkish diaspora consists of Turkish citizens in Europe who settled in European countries through various labor agreements over the decades, and they have now reached to their fourth generation. Since their first arrival in the 1950s, the extent that the Turkish diaspora has transformed throughout the years in terms of integration and civil mobilization has become an interesting case. Undoubtedly, the presence of Turkish diaspora in Europe is more than a function of numbers. It is also a function of exchanges between the diaspora community and Turkey, their motherland. In this regard, Turkish immigrants have engaged in various civic activities and political activities in their adopted countries. Many of them have established civil society organizations. Some of them have become members of parties and associations. So, in this regard, joining us today are some very wonderful guests to help us develop an assessment of the history of the Turkish diaspora in Europe. Our guests are Professor Şebnem Köşer Akçapar, Director of Research Center for Global Migrations at Social Sciences University of Ankara; Hakan, Director of International Law at Stoke White Lawyers; and Klaus Jurgens, Political Analyst and Journalist. So I wish you a warm welcome to all of you. And let me first start with you, Professor Akçapar. The story of Turkish migration to Europe started 6 decades ago, and now we're talking about the emergence of fourth generation among those migrant families. How have the perceptions on Turkey changed over years among the diaspora community?
Okay, how much time do we have? So, yes, of course, 6 years have passed, right? And we're talking about at least fourth generation, the emergence of the fourth generation now in Germany, at least. But there are also other diaspora communities, immigrant populations elsewhere living outside, other than Germany, like because of the thanks to bilateral agreements with France, Belgium, the Netherlands, especially. And, so Turkish labor force entered into those markets. Especially, after the Southern European immigrants were going back to their countries of origin. So this was unprecedented, actually, and so within the years, the population in Germany reached 3 million, of course, with lots of naturalizations, and 6 million, over 6 million altogether, scattered all around the world. But also we have immigrant communities living in the U.S., mostly highly skilled. But we have also those in Canada, Australia, New Zealand. They're almost everywhere, which is great. So how have their perceptions on the country of origin changed within these years? That's a very interesting question. But of course, maybe we can also start discussing whether we have one Turkish diaspora or not, right? So we have multiple diasporas, I can say, those originating from Turkey. And some people, some of our immigrant populations are not even willing to consider themselves even part of the diaspora. So, and that's a fact, right? And plus, even those who consider themselves part of the Turkish diaspora, and they're very fragmented, right? I mean, there's, and this is not surprising, right? And like, for example, they're fragmented alongside with their sociocultural and dimensions like social class, along the religious lines, and along their ethnicity, for example, even sectarian divisions within the community. But then the one thing that really, I mean, for them, for many young generations, let me go back to your original question. For many young generations, Turkey is a place of their ancestors, right? And they don't know the hometown. It can be a small town, a village, I don't know, somewhere in Anatolia. They don't really know that area that well, but they know more the cosmopolitan centers like Istanbul, Izmir, Bodrum, even Antalya, those areas. So, and there, but I think we will discuss that also in great detail later on. But they're very much concerned, the younger generation. They're very much concerned that how they are still seen as the immigrants by the local populations. I mean, by Germans or, wherever they live, as immigrants, because they're born there, raised there. And Turkey is like not a distant land, of course, but so once they are also here in Turkey, they also are seen as an Auslander, a foreigner, so there is a double discrimination also happening there. So there are different attitudes, of course, because there are differences within the diaspora.
Thank you very much for the great answer. Maybe we should proceed to Mr. Camuz regarding especially the Turkish diaspora in the UK. So, Mr. Camuz, whenever we imagine the Turkish diaspora, Turks in continental Europe, particularly in Germany, as Professor Akçapar also mentions, come to mind. However, there is also significant Turkish population in the United Kingdom. What are their civil and political rights? Which challenges do they face in social and economic life? Can you please elaborate their latest status from a legal point of view, since your expertise is also from that area?
I could shape it up like this. I obviously totally agree with what Professor Akçapar has said. I remember one of a Cypriot Turkish friend of mine who was complaining to me saying, when I am here, I am classed as a Turk and not necessarily accepted. And when I'm in Cyprus, they call me the Brit. And they don't accept me as a Turk or a Cypriot Turk. And he goes, when I go to Turkey, which is in his case, obviously it's they call him the Cypro, i.e. the Cypriot. He used to joke about this all the time. He is the worst because he has an identity problem with 3 different locations that he's connected to, i.e. he's Turkish and he has connections to Turkey, Cyprus and London, where he cannot find himself a place. And that was, whilst we were joking about it, is a serious issue that Professor is raising. This is one of the identity issues that's concern for a lot of societies, whether in England, in Germany, or anywhere else, to be honest with you. Yes, the first generation was invited post-Second World War into Europe to work, starting with Germany. But their children and their grandchildren, as Judy described, the 4th generation has a serious identity issues. Turkey for them is a holiday destination and nothing more. It's a distant memory. And I'll tell you what, it's not exaggeration for us to right now say and just be truthful on it. Some of those 4th generation people already lost their identity. They don't even speak the language anymore. And that's the fact, and it's truth. And that's just because they don't want to. And they're born here, raised here, and the standards and culture and social fabric here, they're accepted as they're like British first, if you like. And Turkish is an ancestry now. It's not an identity anymore. And so, and I'm sure it's probably in a bigger scale happening in mainland Europe, like Germany and Holland and France, where many more Turkish diaspora live. In Britain, it's more mixed. We have it's like a mirror of Turkey, to be honest with you. You have variety of people from different religious backgrounds who actually live here. You have ethnic backgrounds. They all represent parts of Turkey, and it really kind of started in the 1960s. For me, looking at it from a legal perspective, it was the Ankara Agreement that actually promoted Turks to uproot and actually start coming into Europe. Ankara Agreement's purpose was to integrate the countries. It was signed in Ankara, hence the name, but it was signed between Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria at the time to engage in trade, business, and freedom of movement between the people, which it kind of served its purpose. It became more popular with the legal case that we actually won in European Court of Justice in 2000. We started in 2002. We won the case and opened up the doorway in 2007 onwards for Ankara applications from Turkey, for Turkish nationals to come and establish businesses. And until now, I can tell you, nearly 50,000 people that we estimate actually benefited from it in UK. I don't know if they've done it anywhere else, but this is a Europe-wide agreement, a treaty between Turkey and the European Union. Any member state was legally bound to evaluate and accept an applications for Turkish nationals, and that allowed freedom of movement. And so this has encouraged Turkish diaspora to uproot themselves from Turkey and move. You know, we can talk about things that have happened in Turkey in 1980s, the military coup, you know, everything else have happened, political stuff that have actually taken place have somehow galvanized for those people to move into Europe. In Britain, this was kind of more popular since 1980s onwards, not like Germany. Germany started in the 60s, but Britain is more to do with 80s onwards. And here, we have a very vibrant society. We have so many charities. We have so many places of worship. We have so many businesses, small and medium businesses especially. They are quite successful and integrated into society, accepted. Turkish culture is part of life of Britain. I mean, it wouldn't be strange to hear families saying, shall we go for a Turkish tonight? Because of our cuisine has become such a popular identifier, if you like, for Brits who actually welcomed Turkish people. Because I can, from my observation, personal observation, of course, I've been living here for 30 years. We are quite part of the society in Britain. We are business people, we are tradesmen, and we have a very, very good, solid business relationship between UK and Turkey on many, many areas. But service sector, definitely, you know, food and textile, and so many sectors that we actually are working here in UK. On a political sphere, we don't have much impact, other than we are somehow proud of our current Prime Minister having Turkish ancestry, which he talks about every now and then he uses it to get elected to say, oh my God, if we accept Turkey into European Union, we've got to get out. Do you remember the campaign he ran in Brexit? He was actually talking about Turkey, saying if we basically don't do this, Turk's going to flood UK. I mean, such a paradox from Boris Johnson. He himself has a Turkish ancestry. Anywho, so I mean, politically, Turkish society in UK, I don't know, for some reason, has not integrated well. We have some councillors, few. One member of House of Lords is originally from Turkey, if I remember correctly, Cypriot Turkish. But you know, Turkish nonetheless, of course. So we don't have much scene in the political scene in UK, but everything else, Turks are quite vibrant and part of British society.
Yeah, especially the parts where you talked about the Cypriot Turkish and like the Brexit process. I'll come to those points, but before that, maybe I should proceed to Mr. Jurgens, and perhaps I should tell that it's been 2 years since 9 people, including 4 Germans of Turkish origin, were massacred by a far-right terrorist in Hanau, Germany. Spent 2 years behind. Since then, minorities in Germany have witnessed the increasingly polarizing climate of racism, where they feel socially and institutionally excluded. So, Mr. Jurgens, what is the latest situation with regards to the investigation of this massacre and terrorist attack?
Well, thank you for this question. I had the honor, and I should say the sad pleasure, to attend the Hanau massacre commemorations a day ago at the Directorate of Communications here in Ankara. It was a timely gesture by the Turkish people, the Turkish government, not only to hold this event, but actually to hold it in the German language, so that the families of these innocent people massacred, it's the only word I can say, find a little bit of comfort and respect, and respect was paid indeed. Now, what is shocking for me, I was born, I measured one more time, exactly 64 kilometers away from Hanau. I know the city extremely well. I know Frankfurt extremely well. When we were there as young people, I labeled my last contribution, the Republic was busy. By that, I wanted to say we took care of everything, but accepting the fact that far-right fascism, racism could ever emerge again. We were the proud new generation. We had a guilt complex. I had one, probably still have one. But we wanted to move on. We wanted to build a democracy. We tried our best. And everyone was still asking, how did you manage? What about the past? Don't you know about it? Of course we knew about it. Now, Hanau investigations, unfortunately, did not proceed the way they were supposed to proceeding. And there are still questions 2 years afterwards. First of all, I want to give 2 examples. Yes, indeed, the emergency doors of one of the restaurants, bars, were closed. There were rumors that this was done in cooperation with the police to allow for raids when there were illegal elements in those places. These investigations were halted afterwards without any result. I'm not putting any blame. I'm not an investigator, just to tell you what is going on 2 years later. Secondly, the police accepted the fact that the emergency telephone number hotline was understaffed. It might have been understaffed anywhere else in the Republic. It might have not. But the families of the victims do not accept these no's as an answer. How is it possible that someone who is apparently on the radar of the authorities with social media posts ultimately becomes a killer machine, kills innocent people? How is it possible that in a very small community, I'm not talking about social control, but this was not a lone wolf. He somehow socialized and radicalized himself via the internet, perhaps even in back rooms of certain bars and cafes and places. So I'm not putting blame on the police. I'm not putting blame on the mayor. I put blame on my own generation that we somehow allowed something like this to happen in the first place. But coming back to your question, short answer, yes. Completely unhappy about the state of investigations. The investigative committee is still going on in the Parliament of Hesse. It recently had its 9th session, and only recently were family members allowed to actually go there and say something. Now, the family members want answers. It can't be undone, but we must make sure that it can never happen again.
Yeah, the points that you raised, like regarding this like unclarity of the investigation, is quite like significant, I guess, and reflecting the far right climate in Germany right now. Maybe like maintaining on that far right topic, Professor Akçapar, I should ask this question to you. Like we've seen a rise of far right political actors, not just in Germany but all across the Europe, like in France and like in Netherlands. So their xenophobic, Islamophobic, and racist discourses have generated concerns about the future of the Turkish diaspora in Europe, basically, not in Germany, France only, but in all across the Europe. So how do you see the future of this challenge?
Well, it's a big challenge, first of all, right? And I told you about this identity issues, how people are at odds with, how they are perceived already. Plus, on top of that, there is this, as you also mentioned, there is this discrimination at the personal level, but there is also discrimination going on at the institutional level. right? At the schools, at internships, at businesses, and in the labor markets, that is, I said schools, educational system, but also socially, how they're perceived, etc. And plus, on top of that, there is this Islamophobia generated across Europe, but also, in other parts of the world, especially intensified after 9/11, of course, and then the emergence of Daesh, etc. But it's a big challenge, of course, how for the integration of Turkish immigrants, right? And because let's take the integration as a concept. It's already a very complex and a contested term, integration. How it is perceived in the UK, Hakan Bey can answer that. How it is perceived in the US and how it is perceived in Germany and also even in Turkey now that Turkey is also an immigration country, right? How it is perceived in Turkey is different. Right. So, and for many years, during my visits to Germany, I realized, maybe not now, but I realized that integration was seen usually as as assimilation. But they're not assimilated well enough. But when we look at the integration, so since the integration is not a one-way road, right? It's it has different dimensions. It has a dimension from the host society, of course, from the immigrant population, from the media even. So there are different layers of integration also, socioeconomic, cultural, political, etc. And legal integration to, like naturalizations and access to citizenship. But when we look at integration, when we look at how integrated Turkish immigrants are, or let's say Germans, or let's say British of Turkish origin, right? I mean, that's maybe the right term to use. There is an active membership on all fronts. What do I mean by active membership? I mean, one is political representation. Maybe it's not the same at every level, because don't forget, we mentioned when we talk about the history of Turkish migration to Europe or to the US or to the UK, we have to consider differences, socioeconomic differences, but we have to think about also the reason of migration in the first place. This actually puts you in a very different position, the reason of migration. You might be a scientist actually migrating for, scientific purposes, for job employment purposes. You might be a forced migrant, like a refugee seeking asylum. Right? You might be a labor migrant who migrated in the 1960s, 70s. And what about the gender dimension? You're a male or a female. So this, or semi-skilled, unskilled, this all have an impact on integration and on, different layers of integration, such as political representation. When we look at Germany today, there is definitely political representation of those Turkish origin Germans at the federal level, at the national level, even at the local level. Hanover mayor is of Turkish origin, I suppose. And there's also a very vibrant associational life. And I'm not only talking about, religious associations, but other associations as well. And it's very vibrant. There's also flourishing businesses and investment. I mean, there's so many good stories to tell and to write about, to be honest. So on integration. Yet, there is this discrimination going on, as I said, at personal level, at the institutional level. And one thing that had Jurgens mentioned, and it's very important, there is this new radicalization going on through social media. There is this maybe in the 70s, in the 80s, or even in the 80s, we didn't see such racist attacks targeting immigrants, right? Discrimination, yes, but maybe not so much racist attacks targeting Turkish immigrants, but we can say so many now, starting with Solingen and Mölln, right, and Köln, don't forget, and then Hanau more recently. But some scientists, for example, call this neo-racism. Right? Maybe not because of your skin color, racism, not because of your skin color, but because of your immigrant background, because of your identity, social identity as an immigrant, or because of your religious identity, because of your headscarf. So these are all, parts of this, what we are experiencing right now, across Europe, but also to, again, in North America to a certain extent. But we have to be able to address this new form of neo-racism. We have to be able to address also this socialization and radicalization through social media, through internet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, social media part is especially, like, I think we should take into account whenever we talk about not just Turkish diaspora, but all the diaspora communities in Europe. So, Mr. Jurgens, in this regard, I think I should ask this question to you. Media has been a component that, we've always considered whenever we discuss the diaspora community and diaspora identity in Germany, in actually all across Europe, but particularly in Germany. I would like to ask, what has been the discourse adopted by the German media regarding racism, racist incidents, and the rise of far-right political actors in the country? What transformations have the German media gone through in regards with the approach towards the Turkish diaspora in the last decades?
Well, this is, of course, a question I must be careful what I say, because I'm very outspoken about this, as you may know. Now, maybe I divide this into two parts. First, let me very briefly come back to Hanau and how Hanau was reported. I read many reports one more time today to prepare for our program. Now, I think the best way of describing it was clinical. Most media reported objective and neutral, but I had this impression somehow it was just another incident. And on the night, dear colleague Khan Elbier from TRT German yesterday mentioned this as well. He's much more the expert on this than me. He said he followed all the events live and all the media reporting. And he said the first one said there was a conspiracy theory. The second one, it was foreign influence. The third analysis on the night of the Hanau killings was there was a drug-fueled fight going on somewhere. And then immediately you had this link to the shisha bar murders. Now, what does this mean? Shisha bar murders, foreigners mingling and mixing, probably with drugs and weapons. Now, of course, they kill themselves amongst each other. It took quite some time before the German media started to objectively report the facts. It was a far-right motivated, racist, xenophobic single man on a killer spree. But perhaps the people who motivated him are not the single one-person people. And he was not with any migration background, not a migration-only fight or killing. He was white as you can call it. Now, this is how the media reported. I was not happy with the reporting at all, but it fits into a wider picture. Now, let me paraphrase. Whatever Turkey does is wrong. This would be the best summary of how the German media reports about Turkey. They have found one particular individual they profess to hate, who is the president of the Republic of Turkey. I have gone deep down into my soul searching why. And believe me, I haven't found an answer. Now, it is not only about one person. It might be a one country misperception. But believe me, if you read one opinion page article in a leading newspaper here and 2 months later in a tabloid there, and then again, you say the lira is in downfall, the Turkish economy is basically collapsing. Then you read there, oh, it's an authoritarian country. Then you read there, oh, please don't go to Turkey. Then you have a number of politicians of Turkish origin who say Turkey is no longer a democracy. And interestingly enough, this is all mirrored in the German media. They really pick it up immediately as hot news. Now, I'm not challenging any of my colleagues if that's the editorial line, but think about the public. Think about the German public who would not have the time to read Turkish newspapers in Turkish, analyze 20 different newspaper programs, listen to TV shows, perhaps never have been to Turkey, have no clue about what is going on, and they get the mainstream and the tabloid media saying everything is wrong what is going on in Turkey. Now, then you add other international communities in Germany, in particular the migrant situation, people in dire need who need a new home fleeing from civil war under distress. And then the public, who is not very well informed, perhaps because they don't have the time, then they draw the line. Everything in Turkey is wrong. Every migrant is wrong. Every migrant is dangerous. And then you sow the seeds of a very dangerous environment where racism can mushroom. And it mushrooms without our knowledge, because we, in turn, cannot monitor 20,000 internet websites, what my dear colleague from Ankara just said. So it's a vicious circle, and we must stop it somehow. But the media plays a crucial role, and I think it is not playing this role correctly in Germany.
Mm-hmm. So let me get back to you, Mr. Camuz. Both Professor Akçapar and Mr. Jurgens talked about the media, like how it affects like the perception on the immigrants, like Turkish diaspora community, etc. So we've talked about this case, but in terms of Germany, but how about the case in the UK? Like, what would be the differences between like the perceptions, basically, like directed towards the Turkish community in the UK, maybe British media, and what examples can you give in this regard?
Racism usually is quite a general term. I mean, I'll be honest with you, the only time that I have witnessed in the last 30 years in Britain about Turks or Turkish or, you know, kind of specific pinpoint in racism that's kind of faces when, like I said, conservative government have chosen to use Turkey as a scaremongering country in Brexit, which is ridiculous. Everybody mocked them. Nobody even took it serious, but they shamelessly used it several times throughout the whole campaign. Other than that, there was no one specific racism against Turks or Turkish community. And I don't know of any like a major ones that I have witnessed it, like in Germany or Holland, i.e. the mainland Europe. Here, it doesn't really. I don't remember any of it. Maybe I don't know, but anyway. That said, racism is rampant. Racism recently has gone up. And I'll be honest with you, comparing with the mainland Europe, British society is more liberal, more accepting, more tolerant. They're more used to it. Imperial history basically allows them to actually know and understand, because they have like Indians and Africans and Americans, and they have kind of integration throughout their history. So one would think that they actually have, more tolerant society here than, elsewhere, for example. But they are catching up and fast. We have a Home Secretary, Priti Patel, who's an Indian origin of family, but her policies are literally one would actually expect a fascist to have. So we have a fascist Home Secretary in the United Kingdom, who basically recently tabled a motion in the Parliament that she's asking Parliament, passing a law, allow her to take away citizenship of somebody like me. Mm-hmm. And if she deems that I am somehow a security threat or any other reason that the Home Secretary feels like it, she'll take away my citizenship and my children's citizenship. And everything I have done here, the life that I have here will mean nothing because she thinks so. And they've used Fatima Begum's case, the girl that actually joined ISIS, as a yardstick to scaremonger people into accepting. But there's an example there. You see, ISIS is a monster, and this British citizen from Bangladesh went and done this. Everyone can do this potentially. I want the power. And as a professor rightly said, 9/11 and everything that happened since, the term, the global war on terror excuse has now justifies everything. And legally, you can't even challenge them because you don't even have a proper public support about it. Why? Because we're fighting terrorism. This is, really dystopian times we're living in now. And the national security mindset has allowed this kind of politicians and the political, the policies to be easily have an access, which then in turn creates open field for racists to find a good space to exercise their racism. If it was suppressed before, because racism does exist, we cannot deny it. Our history is full of it. Just because we're living in 2022 with all this technology and internet and all this, the world has become a little village now, is nonsense. People are generally tend to turn into this given the opportunity. I mean, look at it right now, the conflicts that exist everywhere in the world, you will find elements of racism in it. I mean, Putin only yesterday used history to justify his actions in Ukraine. If he wasn't discriminating, I don't know who was live on TV. And so these kind of things always used for political purpose. And the racists, when they're allowed to have the platform, they become more rampant and more emboldened to exercise their sick idea of discriminating against people. This is not the first time. And so the only way to deal with it, again, is share our experiences and make sure that we actually make this point of this should not be allowed, starting with the politicians. Now, let me say something else here. What's going on to Syrians in Turkey? You see, the Turkish people are kind of worried about Syrians in Turkey, just like they are using the same justification in Europe about migrants coming to Europe. You see what I mean? It's a social movement, a movement of the masses of people are being scared into thinking that migration equals justifies racism. You see, and so this is it keeps repeating itself all the time. We need to be able to openly discuss these things and properly, and get rid of the reasons why people migrate, which then gives birth to such racism that we are witnessing right now.
Yeah, exactly. So perhaps I should, Professor Akçapar, I should proceed the last point you raised regarding the integration, like the concept of integration. Perhaps I should remind one of the speeches that's made by previous German Chancellor Angela Merkel in 2010. She said that attempts to build a multicultural society, the multikulti thing in Germany had utterly failed, and immigrants needed to do more to integrate, including learning Germany, learning German language. So this argument was also embraced by several other European leaders as well, as in the case of France. And the decade after this statement, do you think that such an observation was accurate considering the current status of Turkish diaspora in Europe? What do you say?
Multiculturalism, you're talking about, are you asking me about whether multiculturalism is really dead or
yeah, perhaps we can have this question like this, we can frame the question like this: is multiculturalism, the death of multiculturalism, is true or not? What do you want to say?
I think multiculturalism, if you ask me my personal opinion, I think multiculturalism died long before it was born, right? So, of course, when Merkel said multiculturalism is that, she was not only referring to Turkish immigrants living there, right? Or the integration problems, but she was also referring to the German state, how there were no actually integration policies at first in place. And then they realized, and then they rejected that Germany was an immigration country for so long. That was also kind of a justification for not putting good integration policies at the very beginning. And inclusion, not only integration, of course, but also social inclusion policies, right? And yes, Hakan Bey is right, and we have to look at our own society when it comes to integration, when it comes to immigrant perception regarding immigrants, right? Or or even those Syrians under temporary protection. But then these incidents are, yes, there are incidents definitely, but these incidents are rare considering, I mean, when compared to Europe and other places. That's one thing. But then, of course, we don't want this thing to happen at all in any society, let alone ours, right? And so definitely we have to put in place also proper integration policies, whether they stay in Turkey permanently or they're going to go back soon. A couple of months ago, even during the pandemic, but we were doing field work with Syrian and non-Syrian groups, and they were saying that we don't want to stay in Turkey. We want to be resettled in a third country, right? If they were given the opportunity. Yet they were so willing, these people, they were so willing to have to learn Turkish language, offered by NGOs, etc. They were so willing to take up other courses, designed to improve their livelihoods or employability, let's say. Because they require skills, and these skills might help them wherever they go, whether they go back to their countries of origin, that's voluntary repatriation, or they will be resettled in a third country, or whether they stay in Turkey. So integration policies from day one is really important, and I think Turkey is doing just that, regardless of the discussions made. But of course, there is one problem, which is actually fueling each other in a way, right? And that is the allegiance, your allegiance. Where does your loyalty stand? And so allegiance to the sending state always raises questions, right, concerning your immigrants or diaspora's integration in the receiving society. So that's the case also for Turkey and for Turkish immigrants. So, when they support, the sending country, Turkey, and so the receiving country, I don't like to use the sending country, receiving country dichotomy, because they're born and settled there. Let's say settlement country, they usually question, oh, they don't really belong here. Or look, they're, rallying for Turkey. And Jurgens mentioned about the media perceptions, right? And so in a way, but then this in return had lead to this increasing discrimination, increasing racism in the settlement society. In return, led to increasing nationalism among the diaspora. And this increasing nationalism also triggers, again, the question of whether your allegiance is here, whether you're integrated or not. And, and we saw this example in the Netherlands, right? It doesn't matter, but they were, citizens of the Netherlands. But then we see that some politicians come up and say, oh, you can go back to your countries. But they're Dutch citizens. So where do you send them, actually? So these are, again, again, problems fueling each other.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the answer. Maybe since we talk about Turkish diaspora, Germany has been is a key country to discuss on. So maybe as the last question regarding Germany, Mr. Jurgens, I would like to ask maybe a more contemporary question, following Angela Merkel's long chancellorship. Now, Olaf Scholz is the new Chancellor of Germany. What do you think? What will be the continuities and differences between the approaches of two chancellors? What do you want to say about this?
Well, let me be brief. Now, Olaf Scholz is, in the widest sense, my generation. Now I had the pleasure to to meet him on numerous occasions when we were in youth and student movements in Germany. I'm that old, yes, many years ago. Now, he has a problem. He represents the Social Democratic Party. The conservatives and the far rights are known for their, how shall I put it discreetly, latent, potent hesitation to accept the other amidst themselves. This is normal, standard fare. We are not worried about it. This is life. The liberals are in between. The Greens half and half, but a Social Democratic Party with a strong trade union segment where people are afraid still, and rightly so, in particular after a pandemic, but long before, about job security. They always asked the questions to Social Democrat leaders, are you sure you want to have so many international job seekers? Do we have enough jobs? Now, this was not racism. This was a simple, honest question, and the government failed to answer it. Now, Olaf Scholz taking over from Angela Merkel and her famous words, "Wir schaffen das," we will manage, when the migrant flow started. And her own party was extremely upset about this. The Social Democrats were very mute, of course. They didn't want to lose any votes. So they were basically history. And all of a sudden, Scholz pushed them back into the spotlight. I don't think that Olaf Scholz will become, we mentioned the word, a very multicultural chancellor, because for the most bizarre reasons, he has to go fishing for votes in the center-right segment. If not, the Social Democrats again will go down to 10%. So he has to be basically a multicultural chancellor without being multicultural. I go back, if I still have 1 minute, to Frankfurt, back to Hanau. Frankfurt was the first city in Germany where a senator, which is the head of the department, the leading member of the local parliament, for multiculturalism was elected. It was Daniel Cohn-Bendit early in the 1980s, a member of the Green Party in a coalition with the Social Democrats at the time. The Social Democrats very cleverly shifted all responsibility for multiculturalism to the Greens. We don't have to deal with it. It is for the young, the anti-establishment, the immigrants. Let them take care of it. At the time, the Greens had no other topic except for environment, very good, and of course, multiculturalism. The SPD never really took it on board. So I would be very much surprised to see Olaf Scholz to be a very, very, very pro-increased migration chancellor. But I really hope that he sits down, takes a close look at his agenda and says no to racism, no to xenophobia, yes to social inclusion, yes to integration, make it a one country composed of many different nationalities and backgrounds. This, I think, if he manages this, it would be a huge success already.
Thank you. This was a great answer regarding the shift in terms of discourses, etc. Maybe we should go back to the United Kingdom, Mr. Camuz. As you also mentioned, I think we should highlight that as a guarantee of power of the Cyprus negotiations, Britain also hosts a significant amount of British Turkish Cypriot community. Even prior to the Speaker of Parliament, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, paid a visit to the Greek Cypriot administration in recent weeks, the community even made a statement that he should extend his visit to Turkish Cypriot officials in the north. So do you think, to what extent can Turkish Cypriot community in the UK affect a solution in the years-long dispute?
This is one of the longest-running disputes, as you know. It has quite a long and bloody history. And it's been a political play, I'll be honest with you, for decades now. Cypriot Turks want to be recognized as a separate country, and the world has completely ignored it. They do have quite presence here in numbers in the UK. And like I said, we have a Cypriot Turkish member of House of Lords, and we have other politicians. They were integrated into British society even long before from the Turks from the mainlands. And so and if I can say, they've been integrated quite fast. And even the current British Consul General in Istanbul is his family originally from they're Cypriot Turks.
Yep.
He's proud of that too. I mean, like everyone is. They don't have much power to affect any change on Britain's policy when it comes to Cyprus dispute. Because obviously this dispute has many angles, and the strategic location of the island, recently discovered fields of oil in the Mediterranean, and the pipelines, and politics of the region. Mediterranean is a very strategic, close to the Middle East. It has so many aspects, so many different aspects, and so the dispute is quite big, and it's international, and major players are in it. And your diaspora members here of Cypriot origin, Turkish Cypriot origin, trying to lobby and argue their points, really, although I have to give them credit, and they've been very loyal and quite hard working at telling the world what they've suffered in the hands of Greek Cypriots in the 50s and 60s and 70s until the operation 1974 to bring the peace to the island. Whilst they actually been very active in telling the world their story, and quite successfully, especially being challenged by the Greek Cypriot community in UK, because there's many of them here as well. I don't know if they have actually made any impact in Britain's approach and policy when it comes to resolving this dispute, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And recently the Cyprus issue is now kind of being dealt directly by Turkey and the new government in Northern Cyprus. And I can tell you, for quite years, they were actually campaigning for this outside Greek embassy and outside Turkish embassy supporting Turkey for giving support to these Cypriot Turks. But all of that has kind of ceased recently. There's not much of an activity from Cypriot Turks on the Cyprus issue. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Thank you for the answer, Professor Akçapar. Maybe like one of the matters that we should also talk about is the relationship between Turkish diaspora and other diaspora communities, like, for example, in the case of like Netherlands, the Moroccan diaspora, or in the case of like France, like Algerian diaspora, or even like as a recent example, the Syrian diaspora, like in Germany. So what kind of a relationship do Turkish communities have like with other diaspora communities? How are these relations reflected in the political sphere? What do you want to say about this?
Good question. Of course, diasporas, as per definition, they're very transnational, right? I mean, it's a very fluid atmosphere, also not static. So they are very responsive to changes in society, to changes in the global politics, global economy, and what have you. The Turkish diaspora community, or diasporas, let me put it in plural. They are very active also among themselves, in the Germany, UK, in other countries, definitely. But I think the communication is. How can I say? There are barriers in front of this better communication, let's say, among the Turkish diasporas. And when I say diasporas, I'm also talking about the community leaders, right? And again, I said the fragmentation. We need to look at the fragmentation in the diaspora, because of I think this lack of communication is because of social class, because of reasons of migration, because of the skill level, skill set, etc. Right? And regarding with the other diasporic, with other immigrant populations, yes, they share the same. I mean, most of them share the same religion. That's the Sunni Islam. So there's some kind of a talk there among the different groups of Muslim communities, larger Muslim communities, let's say. But yet this dialogue could have been much better, to be honest, when it comes to asking for better rights, for their own rights. But if I go back to, there's also the whole talk of Euro-Islam. This can be another debate, for example, for another discussion here, and whether it's successful or not. Some groups, migrant communities are very much into this talk, whereas some others are more reluctant. That's another discussion. But I would like to underline here that the Turkish immigrant communities, the Turkish origin people are also very responsive to diaspora engagement policies coming from the state in the recent years. And this is partly can be explained because of the diaspora engagement policies, which was more passive, right, in the past. Now it has become more proactive. Right? Of course, they, again, because of the differences in the community, there are different reasons, different, let's say, different attitudes towards this proactive diaspora policy coming from the state. But definitely diaspora members have long proven themselves to be the very important players as regards to soft power. Right? I'm not only talking about Turkey, but look at the Jewish diaspora in the US. And they're also big actors, not when it comes to not only in economic remittances, but also in political remittances, preventing conflict, for example, in their home countries. Also bringing in political remittances, I said, but the social remittances. We have a very big scientific diaspora, whether we acknowledge it or not. Okay, it doesn't end and start and end with Uğur Şahin and Özlem Türeci of BioNTech in Germany. We have many more people like that, and there is time actually that we discover that scientific diaspora if we like to make proper investments in tech and the future of our country.
Yeah, exactly. So perhaps like as you also previously mentioned, Mr. Camuz, like the process, like Brexit process, was a significant one for the Turkish community as well, like all the communities. What was the political behavior of the British Turkish community during the Brexit process? How did the process shape their perspective towards the EU and the future of like EU-UK relations? What do you want to say about this?
It ended the Ankara agreement, which was allowing Turkish nationals a very exceptional gateway into establishing life in UK, which is really, from Turkish citizens' point of view, quite a negative development. It was, Turkey was more integrated when it comes to business with the UK. When it was part of EU, the whole customs union allowed very smooth and easy transition of kind of businesses between the two countries. Turkey is quite an important country when it comes to, like I said, food, textile, many sectors. But more importantly, the people here, the diaspora, Turkish diaspora's contribution and understanding of this, I could say, was neglected by Turkish diaspora here. There wasn't like a debate. There wasn't like any kind of challenges. No expression of opinion in the kind of the small platforms we have here in the UK, in the Turkish diaspora. It was largely ignored. Individually, of course, people probably did go to the booths and kind of voted yes or no. And every now and then, how can I say? People probably discuss amongst themselves. Did you say yes or no, or leave or stay? But that's it. It didn't go beyond that. To be honest with you. The Brexit did not have much of a political impact on the mindset and thinking of Turkish diaspora until Boris Johnson used Turks as an excuse, and that's when everybody here kind of talked about it from that point of view, not as hi, let's take a part in this whole process of deciding Britain's exit outside of EU. No, it was about, he's using our name. And then it became a joke that his ancestry, his great-grandfather, Mr. Kemal, whatever he did, and then how he was betraying Ottoman Empire becomes such a big debatable issue. And that's the only connection we have as a Turkish diaspora in Britain to Brexit.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. So maybe as a final point, since we are running out of time, Mr. Jurgens, how do you see the future of the third and fourth generation of Turkish diaspora in terms of integration into the policy making processes of the adopted countries, like Professor Akçapar mentioned, for example? Even not in the policy making process, but we have like Uğur Şahin and like Özlem Türeci and like all famous names now like in Germany. What might be their impact with regards to relations between Turkey and their adopted countries?
Yes, let me be very brief. Another personal recollection now, including my own family. I think the diaspora, although I seldom use the word, I tell you why in a minute. Now, they are in between assimilation and basically sticking to at least some of their values and traditions and culture, but still being happy in Germany. Now, the question is, where do you draw the line? Now, when I see the younger generation, the friends of our own daughter, for example, going to schools where in every class you have at least 10, 20% Turkish kids, going to a school where you have at least out of 40 staff, at least 10% with Turkish backgrounds, fully integrated. And no one asks the question anymore, where are you from? Because you are simply there. Now, this is the way I want to achieve. This is what multiculturalism means to me. You don't ask, where are you from, by the way? It doesn't matter. You are here. Now, I think the younger generation really can manage. The younger generation really can manage unless their parents, and again, last time I mentioned this, and the media put them into this little kutu system, as we call it in Turkey. The box system. You are with a migratory background. You must behave like this, The outside world is dangerous. Oh my God, this is long gone, The outside world is for all of us. I really believe the young generation going to school, going to good education places, becoming leading scientists, yes, becoming leading entrepreneurs, just showing them that the world of guest workers, Gastarbeiter, it was so vital. Of course, it helped both sides, but then workers came and people stayed. This is what many people never understood. And by now, the third and the fourth generation, the people I meet, they for them, it's totally normal where they are. Yes, they have perhaps lost a little bit of their language abilities because they speak better German than Turkish, I know. But they are still proud via the family, and why not? But I think what my esteemed colleague said, showing off that Turkish citizens or people with Turkish background not only contribute to society, but can actually shape it for the better. Now, this would be a development I really want to see. And I think the younger generation, we should pass on the baton to them.
So I think like this debate can actually take a longer time, but our time is unfortunately up. And we had a fantastic, fascinating debate on the Turkish diaspora community in Europe. On this occasion, I would like to thank all our guests today, Professor Şemnem Köşer Akçapar, Hakan Camuz, and Klaus Jurgens for their contributions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fatih.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fatih.
And I would also like to thank all our audience for their interests. Stay tuned for our future events as part of TRT World Forum's digital debates, and have a nice day.